But let's talk about the US tariffs then. And the US has imposed fresh 10% tariffs on imports from India under Section 301. Citing concerns over forced labor in global supply chain, India was initially considered for a 12.5% tariff but secured the lower rate after adopting measures to prohibit imports made using forced labor. Now, the tariffs are part of the action against 60 economies and came as India and the US continue negotiations on the interim trade agreement. My colleague Sumita is now joining us with the contours of this.
Absolutely. So today is when the 10% tariffs that President Donald Trump had announced way back earlier this year under Section 122 of the Trade Act of the 1974, they expire today. And in place of those 10% tariffs, what really happens is that the US has now imposed 10% tariffs on goods that are purchased from India and other countries, or what they described as their failure to impose bans on imports made with forced labor. Now, what's important to note here is that in this USTR finding, or in this final press release by the USTR, they state that this tariff rate, in fact, is applicable on certain other countries as well, and those countries include Bangladesh, Cambodia, Canada, the United Kingdom, Sri Lanka, Pakistan as well. So, of course, this is similar to those countries. And what's also important to note here is that this is related to the forced labor investigations that had been started under Section 301. And of course, India had presented a very, very strong counter when these hearings took place earlier in July this month. And India stated that we have additional safeguards, we have proper mechanisms to ensure that there is no importation or there is no export of goods produced using forced labor. And of course, this is important given the fact that 10% is a decent tariff rate. From the earlier one, we had 18% earlier on, but those tariffs were struck down by the United States Supreme Court as illegal. In fact, this is also important to sort of understand that this is coming in at a time when, of course, India and the United States are looking at finalizing a trade deal. Commerce Secretary Rajesh Agrawal told us a couple of days back that the framework trade deal is ready and that it will be signed at the right time. And in fact, understanding on both the sides is clear that the trade deal talks are progressing well. And of course, all aspects of the trade deal will get addressed. This is what he stated. Before it gets signed, all of these aspects will be addressed, and that also includes investigations under Section 301, which actually caught India and many other countries by a surprise completely. And of course, India has maintained that there is sustainability that's essentially needed. The other thing that's important to understand here in this matter is the fact that on June 14th, India amended its foreign trade policy to prohibit the import of goods that were produced using forced labor. So, of course, this is an important matter. This brings in some certainty, but definitely there is another investigation that's still pending, and that's on market access, and excess of goods imported.
Right.
So that remains to be seen.
Right, Sumita, thank you so much for joining us and explaining to us. And yes, 10% tariffs on India kicks off today.